On September 16th, 1995, in Long Beach, California, a baby is born to Ed and Shelly Gordon. And what they don't know yet is this baby is going to grow up to be a NBA champion, a slam dunk contest legend, a devoted brother, and someone whose grace under pressure teaches us a whole lot about this human life we're all experiencing. I am super excited for this. We're going to be covering none other than the Mr. Nugget, the Aaron Gordon, and yeah, I'm so excited. But there's some stuff going on because we only have his birthday and where he was born, but we don't have his birth time, which means we need to go on an investigation and do some chart rectification. So let's get into it. First off, let's talk about why time matters. In astrology, the birth time is one of the most important things because that is what shapes the birth chart, the natal promise. And without that, all of the planets are kind of scattered. You don't know where they belong, and it's hard to get a good read on what that natal promise is, what you're coming here to experience. Different forms of astrology, you could see what you're like and how you show up. In astrology, the time is super important because it's what shapes our worldview, the lens that we see the world through, how we operate, why we have the beliefs we do, everything. So it's massively important that we figure it out. And when we're missing it, we essentially don't have a strong foundation for the rest of the story of the natal promise. So today we're gonna get into figuring out which one best fit. And yeah, so let's get into it. We're gonna go into my method of chart rectification right now and how I do that. So with my method, I'm not guessing. I am building a case, and that's kind of why I do multiple, just kind of show how my brain processes which one makes the most sense. And with building that case, we're using different evidence such as life events, public life events, of course, because he's a celebrity, we have easy access to that. We're gonna use different timing of stuff in his life and see how that plays out. And most importantly, the one thing we do know right now is where all the planets were. Using all three of those, we should be able to figure out which chart makes the most sense for him and then go on to see what his chart reveals about him, what his natal promise is, the lessons he's meant to come here and learn, what that looks like publicly to us. We're also gonna look at why certain rising signs work and other ones absolutely do not. So step one of all of this, who is Aaron Gordon? I'm born and raised in Denver, so I've been a Nuggets fan since the beginning of time. I have so many fond memories of the Nuggets, especially when they were the Nuggets. Great times, love that. And when we look at who Aaron Gordon is in this lifetime at this moment in time, he is a player for the Denver Nuggets. He was originally number 50 here. He changed his number to 32, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons he might have done that. He was drafted 4th overall by Orlando in 2014 at 19, I believe. He was there a good chunk of his career and then was traded to Denver in 2021. In 2023, he won the NBA championships with the Denver Nuggets. With, as a born and raised Denver, I don't know, Denverite, is that the right word? That is one of the happiest days of my life because we did it. We really did. He is known as a high energy defender and one of the most graceful dunkers of all time. Dunkers kind of sounds crazy, but you know what I'm talking about. Whether it's in the actual competition or just in game, he is so graceful, so eloquent. And we're gonna talk about why that is. Aaron Gordon is one of the most iconic, infamous contestants who never won and should have won both times if we're being honest. But we're gonna get into why he didn't win in part 2 of this video. So if that interests you, definitely stick around, watch this video so you understand some more about him. And then next video, we're gonna get into some of the implications of maybe why he did not and why that wasn't part of his purpose, his mission here on earth of things to accomplish. The way I look at a natal promise is it's before we incarnate, reincarnation is a weird thing, but before we incarnate, we definitely come with a plan of, hey, these are the lessons I want to learn. This is what I want to practice. This is what I want to test myself on. All of these different things. We see that in our natal promise, aka our birth chart, and from there we have these experiences in the real realm. I believe everything happens for a reason, and I feel like once we get into what I believe his rising side is, we can kind of break down what that is and understand why, even those were massive public events that obviously didn't go the way he wanted them to, they needed to happen for his soul's evolution. So in 2016, he competed against Zach LaVine and unfortunately lost, but it was a gracious defeat. In 2020, he went up against Derek Jones Jr. and unfortunately lost once again. That one was more personal. In the part 2 of this video, we're also going to break down why that was more personal. And yeah, as of right now, he swore he was never going to do it. I swear I have memory of him last year saying he was going to run it back, but I don't know. I do not know. So yeah,
I enjoy it. I tune in every year pretty much regardless of what's going on and where I am in the world. It's going to be in LA next year. I know John Morant was kind of going back and forth on Twitter with Zach, and so I chimed in. Like, I still have some pretty cool dunks that I could do. However, it's a long season, you know, and it's a young man's game.
So in chart rectification, one of the things that I do is look at physical appearance, because although it shouldn't be what we use to define what their rising sign is, we definitely want to take it into consideration, because that first house, which is where your rising sign is, rules your physical body. So it is important to kind of understand some of that connotation, so that way when we look at different charts, we could understand, okay, does this fit, you know, on the personality level? Does this fit on the physical level? Does this fit in terms of the things we know? We're using all of these things to build our case, like I said at the beginning, and really figure out which one makes the most sense. So one of the biggest things about Aaron Gordon is he is objectively one of the most beautiful NBA players of possibly all time. It's super funny because I just saw like an Instagram reel where they narrowed down like who they thought was like the most attractive NBA players, and they did not include Aaron Gordon, which is crazy. Everybody was in their comments and letting them know about themselves. And yeah, so part of what makes him so attractive to a lot of people is his very strong bone structure, and he just is so photogenic. He literally looks otherworldly, but in a very, I want to say, like, down to earth way. He is extremely fit, extremely athletic, literally a model. He has different campaigns, and I'm just saying, if you're not familiar, make yourself familiar. But yeah, he also has a few different tattoos, which we're gonna kind of run it back to. Using his tattoos, we could kind of understand more of what he resonates with, which is an important thing. So as far as his personality and values are known, he is literally called Mr. Nugget. After he won the championship, he was in the streets of Denver celebrating with the people, and to me, that is a man of the community. That is someone who wants to share that joy with the people who understand what it means most. He is known for being extremely graceful under pressure and really showing up to the moment. He is a team player like no other. He does what needs to get done without needing all of the glory for it, just doing his part. He is especially close with his family, and it seems even closer with his siblings, if that even makes any sort of sense. He has his own foundation, which of course is a big thing for the community as well, and he is extremely well spoken in interviews. He seems like such a fun person to be around, to just talk to. We also want to look at his family context in terms of the stuff we know about him. He is the third child of Ed and Shelly Gordon. And then he has an older sister named Elise, who was born in 1992. From what I could tell, she graduated from Harvard, which is so cool. Yes, you do that. Also played basketball at Harvard. Crazy. Love that. Brains and talent. Wow. And beauty. She's so pretty too. And from other information I found is she had been his personal manager when he initially signed in the NBA and moved with him to Orlando. He also has an older brother named Drew Gordon, who previously played in the league as well. Unfortunately, his brother passed in 2024. We'll talk about this and the impact that it possibly could have had on Aaron a little bit later in the video, but we definitely want to do so with care, and because it is such a personal subject, I don't want to get in too deep. I feel like it's one of those things. This is his life, and it's fun to use celebrities to learn astrology and see how astrology is in real life. At the same time, these are still people who have real emotions, so for me, I definitely want to handle it with care. After Drew's passing, Aaron had actually changed his number on the Nuggets from number 50 to number 32. It seems like all of his siblings had played with the number 32 at some point or another, and I believe his dad played with it as well, so it's one of those family heirlooms, I guess one could say. And he also really stepped in and became a father figure for his nephews as well. Other notable stuff we know about Aaron Gordon is he has a shoe deal with 361 degrees, 361 which is also where Nikola Jokic has his same shoe deal with. Nikola and Aaron have a super important relationship that we see in his chart, or what I believe to be his chart. I'm just gonna say his chart for all intents and purposes. Some of the other things we know is he is very talented. He's put out songs before. He has acted in movies. It's still a good movie now, but it was better when I was a kid. I love Kyrie Irving and in Uncle Drew. That's when I first met him, and I was just like, okay. I don't remember his character, but yeah, that's when I first met him. Some other notable stuff that we're gonna use for reference is his pet Rottweiler, his dog, had actually bit him on Christmas or around Christmas in 2023, and he ended up getting a bunch of stitches with that. That's another one of those important events where we could see it in the chart. I'm gonna kind of reference a couple interviews that I've seen of him where he has mentioned different things. So one of the big things that we're going to talk about where it relates to one of the aspects he has in his chart is he had said that he had went on a date and she had left her phone, or something happened to which he saw her phone and saw that her like last recent search was like Aaron Gordon's net worth, which is absolutely crazy. But he has a aspect in his chart that we see without the birth time that tells us why that probably happened and maybe part of the issues surrounding that. So those are most of the notable things that we're going to talk about. I feel like that gives us a good base of things to work with and really move forward and push forward with. So that's a little bit about Aaron Gordon, whose chart we're going to be working with today. And now let's move into what we do know about his chart without his birth time, and then we're gonna build on from there. Even without his birth time, we can calculate where all the planets and asteroids fell. What we can't do is place them, so let's go through that. So his sun sign is Virgo, and that is very much his life voice, his, I always say like his energy pack, what gets him going, what lights him up, what fuels him. And that's the thing that most people typically know is their sun sign. So very important, some things we could associate with Virgo suns. They're very analytical, they are technical masters and extremely precise. They are often of service to others, and that is a big thing for them. They have incredible attention to detail, and sometimes they're even perfectionists. So all very interesting. When we watch Aaron play as a Virgo sun, we definitely see how he has such a crazy level of mastery, and just the way he does stuff is so elegant. It's about more than just like the natural talent and natural like athleticism, the raw athleticism. It's truly just technically so sound. The fundamentals, it's definitely that energy where it's like the footwork, the angles, the timing. Some of the passes that go back and forth between him and Nikola, I'm just in awe with every single time, because it's like, how did that work? How did that work? They have to telekinesis. That's the only things that make sense. Virgo suns are definitely the ones who are going to be analyzing old film and looking at stuff and saying, hey, I did this, next time I'm going to make sure I do this and it's going to be even better. They strive to really be the best of the best. And if you know a Virgo, you know a Virgo. Virgos are also known for being super humble servants and really giving back. And I think that's one of those things that we see with Aaron and his organization and just some of the stuff he does for the community. It doesn't have to be about him necessarily. It's about more than just that. And I think that's extremely well highlighted in the different stuff he's involved with and the stuff we know about him. So next up we have his moon, which is in Gemini, and I love that, but that is also crazy. Your moon is your emotional needs, your inner self, what is the truest form of you when maybe others aren't around. A Gemini moon is very versatile and adaptable. They need to be on go. They need the mental stimulation. They need to be around people who make them think. However, they don't always want to get into the deep stuff. That has to be something that is earned. It's not something that is just given. It's one of those things where like you might have a conversation with a Gemini moon and you're like, wow, I learned so much. And then you're like, do I actually know anything about this person? Very much that energy, but they are the best to talk to. Geminis are so much fun where it's just like go, 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 go. Gemini moon can also be kind of restless in the sense that like Mercury is the fastest planet in the zodiac. Mercury rules Gemini. Emotionally, you might run through things and realize you didn't ever process them until they come back up. And now it's like, oh, now I have to sit with that double. It's also a very playful, very curious sign for the moon to be in, where it's very lighthearted. Aaron's Gemini moon shows how he is so adaptable in the different arenas he's in, let alone as a player, and how he could really let go of some of the emotional stuff that comes his way that maybe like isn't worth his time. I feel like that's one thing that Geminis are super good about, is realizing what's worth their time and what's not. And as soon as the Gemini's over something, they are over it. They are over it. They are over it. They are over it. They never want to talk about it again, quite actually. Emotionally, you could say that they're not just gonna sit there and like think about the same thing over and over and over again. And I feel like that pairs very well with his Virgo sun, because where his Virgo sun wants to look for a way to make that better, his Gemini moon is just like, it happened, next thing, let's go. You know, Gemini moons could also be super private in terms of their like deeper feelings, and that's just because Gemini, when we look at the type of conversation that Gemini has, it's one of those things where it's the lighthearted stuff, the fun stuff, the creative expressions of stuff. They don't want to think about the heavy stuff. That's not fun for them. Next up, we have Mercury in Libra, and this is the place of the diplomat. This is someone who wants everyone to get along, which I feel like is super funny that he's the youngest sibling, because to me this feels very oldest sibling, very wise, very like, okay, let's get it together. He is someone who probably seeks a lot of balance in communication. He's someone who probably could see from someone else's point of view and understand, like, okay, I understand why you did what you did. It shows that he is extremely thoughtful. He's extremely well spoken. This is why Aaron's interviews are so good, is because they're extremely well spoken. They're thoughtful. They come across wisdom almost in a sense. And he doesn't pop off. Like, even after his losses, he wasn't bitter to most people. He was able to say like, hey, this is what happens and I respect it. And I feel like that is a very Libra Mercury thing, because most people would still be mad to this day. He is very considerate with his words, and because he has a Libra Mercury, ultimately strives for fairness. He could also want to debate, but at the end of the day, like, he needs a resolution where both parties feel respected, both parties feel as though they were heard. He needs that balance. Next up, we're gonna get into some not so fun stuff. Well, semi-fun. So Aaron also has Venus in Libra at 0 degrees and Chiron in Libra at 1 degree. So the thing about Venus is, of course, that is art, beauty, love, values, relationship, harmony. Venus rules Libra, so this is naturally in its home sign. This is where it's really comfortable. However, where it gets interesting is we have Chiron. So the mythos of Chiron is that he is a centaur, half human, half horse, and he was shot with a poisoned arrow, and with that arrow he essentially got a wound that he could never heal, although he was already immortal, so he would consistently be in pain. However, he is known to be the wounded healer, the one who could help others but can't necessarily help himself. Because we have Venus and Chiron so close to each other, they are essentially magnifying the ever-living life out of each other, and that is an extremely big lesson in his life. Chiron is the wounded healer, which essentially is where your biggest wound is, but it's also the greatest gift you give to others. Venus conjunct Chiron in Libra is literally wounded beauty archetype, so that's where I'm sure it gets kind of difficult in the aspect of so many people lusting after him and being like, yes, this, because it's just like, okay, all of these people see my beauty, but do they see me? Do they see my worth? Do they see my value? And it could kind of create a wound around being seen. That's not saying he doesn't love the attention, because I'm sure there is a part of him that does love that, but there is definitely that other aspect where it's just like, okay, is that all you see? And I think that would be so difficult. This is someone who's objectively beautiful, but has a wound around actually being seen and feeling like they're seen. They might be seen by millions, but not feel like they are truly seen and valued for who they are despite their appearance. This could also be seen as someone who wants harmony and partnership, but has been hurt in relationships as well. But the gift that they offer is they are able to truly see people, because they understand what it's like to not be seen. So although this is what has hurt them the most, this is also where they give that gift they wish they could receive, essentially. So the dating story I mentioned with somebody Googling his net worth, that is quite literally the definition of Venus conjunct Chiron. That was the epitome of being valued for what he has, aka his net worth, instead of all that he is, all that he is capable of, and being seen for one thing and one thing only. Venus Chiron conjunct people are absolutely stunning, but it's just one of those things where it is definitely hard to process in this world, especially where we put aesthetics so high. It definitely creates a lot of superficial relationships, where obviously superficial relationships are only fun to a certain degree. You know, there needs to be some real character, some real value there, and when there's not, that's when it puts a whole wrench in things. And it's almost like once people figure out like, oh, you just see me as like a pretty face essentially, then there's like a level of betrayal there, because it was just like, oh, not you too as well. There's a whole different betrayal there because you see me the same way the rest of the world does, and that's devastating. This placement is going to be key in our rectification. Next up, in Scorpio, we have both Mars and Pluto. Mars in Scorpio is one of my favorite placements for athletes, because that is that natural athleticism. You're super intense, super focused. You are going to go the extra mile that nobody else is going to go, and you are going to do it in a way that is so strategic that others can't help but be amazed by witnessing such. And I feel like we 100% see that. Mars and Pluto is his drive, his power, his intensity. This is also a placement that Luca has as well, and I feel like Luca uses it in a bit of a different way at this moment in time than Aaron, but it is one of my favorite placements for athletes because this is just next level, top tier. Because Pluto rules the underground, the power literally comes beneath the surface, and it's one of those things where it's just, when it has the right motivation, it's on forever. And I love that. Kind of scary sometimes, but I love that, especially for athletes. This is someone who plays sport at the level they do, not even for the glory, but for the kill. And I feel like that's especially what makes him such a great defensive player. And when he slams it, it's one of those things where it's like, you're going to feel that. No question about it. Pluto in Scorpio is a generational planet, meaning everyone born around the same time has Pluto in Scorpio, but not everybody has Mars in Scorpio. Mars also traditionally rules over Scorpio as well, so it is insanely powerful. And it's one of those things where having access to that like resource of unending drive, passion, intensity is one of those things where right now he's injured, and we can almost see why, because it was just like, I'm gonna go the extra mile to do what I need to do to show up for my team when they need me to show up. And that's beautiful, but also awful, because now he's injured and 4 to 6 weeks, so we hate that. Another interesting thing about Mars and Pluto in Scorpio is this isn't going to be the flashy player. This is going to be the player who literally amplifies all of those around him and brings that intensity to a new level. This is going to be the person who's the enforcer, the one who is the big bad scary like wolf essentially to the other team. This is the big dog. This is the player who's going to transform the game, not through stats but through intensity. Like, everyone on the court is going to be leveled up when this player is playing, because they feel their passion, their intensity, their power, and it makes everyone else better. It is a natural amplifier. And when we look at Aaron, especially with his role on the Nuggets, we see that he's not consistently the highest scoring player, and he doesn't need all of the glory, but he's doing what he needs to. He is locking down the other team's best player and doing the dirty work that nobody else wants to do, but like for him, that is where he gets the glory from. It 100% of transforming the game, transforming those around him. Jupiter in Sagittarius is Jupiter at home, and when we have Jupiter in Sagittarius, so we have expansion, we have luck, philosophy, wisdom, we have the guru, and all of these great things. This is optimism, this is seeking wisdom, this is seeking meaning, and this is wanting to grow and explore. And although this is a great place to have, but where Jupiter is in his chart matters so much, and we're going to come back to this when we look at the rectified chart. Saturn in Pisces retrograde. So Saturn is the teacher, it's the stern but loving father who's definitely going to be stern. It's the planet of lessons, the planet of structure, the planet of time, the planet of maturity. Saturn in Pisces is learning about compassion, but having boundaries, spirituality through discipline, and really doing the work. This is letting go of control for the power of having control. This is healing old wounds. This is service to something greater, believing in something greater, doing the hard stuff because you believe that there is something more out there. And with it retrograde, a lot of these themes get turned inward and internalize a lot of the past karma, which karma is not a bad thing. We came here to acquire karma and balance out our karma. Karma is not a bad word, and I hate that people think of it as a bad word. It's simply doing the things that we need to do in this lifetime. Saturn in Pisces is the last zodiac, so this is very old, so very spiritually wise. That doesn't mean that the lessons are going to be easier, but there is wisdom to be gained through it. Saturn is going to be one of the most important planets when we look at different charts for Aaron, because it's going to show where a lot of our lessons come from, where a lot of the things that we came here to resolve come from, and where it falls in his chart is crucial and almost critical. Okay, so Uranus and Neptune are both in Capricorn. Both of those are also generational planets, and both of those are also retrograde. Uranus in modern day astrology rules Aquarius. That's going to be your sudden, your unexpected. Uranus in Capricorn is going to be revolutionizing structures, which inwardly we could say really just taking hold of who he is and understanding, like, hey, just because these are the things that make me up don't mean they have to be done in a way that hurts me. It's definitely one of those things where there's a lot of growth that could be done inwards, especially since it's retrograde and it's introspective. Uranus in Capricorn is also unconventional approaches to tradition, and when we look at that going inwards, there's a lot of interesting things we could see there. Neptune in Capricorn is creating a spiritual journey with success and ambition, and it's mysticism, but it needs to be practical in the way it is done. These two planets together in Capricorn definitely have a lot of desire to spiritually grow. However, they need to do it in their own way, and with both of them being retrograde, it needs to be done in a way that feels like it's honoring themselves. These two together in Capricorn is the spiritual rebel who really needs to do stuff their own way, but is going to find a way to honor Capricorn in doing so. They are going to have structure. They're just going to make it their own. They are going to have ambitions, but it is going to be a spiritual journey and process to reach those ambitions. Lastly, we have the North Node retrograde in Libra. So we have a whole stellium going on in Libra. And when we have stelliums, that means we have extremely concentrated energy there. And because most of them are personal planets or things that personally impact him, we know that that is going to be a place of major focus for this lifetime and something that he definitely has to overcome, especially with his North Node there. So his North Node in Libra shows that he's meant to learn how to create balance in partnerships, how he's meant to live in harmony, that he is here to learn about partnership versus solo efforts, which is Aries, which would be the South Node. It is here to learn about grace and beauty and doing things in a ballerina-esque way. That's the best way for me to describe Libras. They're just ballerinas. He's here to learn about seeing the other perspective, especially when we think about that Mercury also being in Libra. He's meant to have those tough conversations and be able to put himself in someone else's shoes and understand why they made the choices they did. Doesn't mean he has to agree with them, but to have that understanding. The South Node would be in Aries, and that means he has already learned those lessons of being an individual, being solo, that he's already had to be the warrior and be the competitor, the one who fights to stay alive. And we see now him leaning into the opposite in Libra. In this life, he's really here to learn what it's like to live life in harmony and balance. This is going to matter so much when we get to part 2 and look at the dunk contest, show why they were so important to his soul's evolution. Naturally, dunk competitions are solo events. They don't require other people most times, and it's one of those places where it's about the individual glory and being the best. Very Aries themes. But his soul is learning Libra things. It's learning about cooperation, it's learning about team harmony, and grace is in defeat, and seeing others' perspectives. So put a pin in that and remember that. We're going to come back to that in the next part. Those are his natal planets, and that tells us a little bit about him, but the real question is, where do they go? Essentially, houses are stages where the planets perform, so we absolutely need to find his rising sign to understand what is going on in this natal promise narrative. So let's get to testing. Before we go over the 3 potential rising signs that I think he could possibly have, let's go over what chart rectification is. Chart rectification is the process of determining a birth time, or in our case today, a rising sign. We do so by testing major life events against different rising signs to see which narrative fits the evidence best. This means this might not be 100% true. However, once we get rolling, you're going to see exactly why I believe what I believe. And maybe you'll hop on board too, or maybe you'll think it's a different sign. And I look forward to discussing that. So the basic process is we're going to gather our life events, which I already kind of outlined in the first part of this video. And then we're going to know when they happened. And from there, we could look at the timing of where these planets would have been when they happened, how we could look at how the transiting planets affected his natal planets and see if there's any patterns we could recognize there. We also will look for patterns and see if there's different key players that keep popping up, key signs, see if we could understand what the narrative is trying to tell us. Lastly, we're going to look at the life path alignment and see if their chart ruler really makes sense with what they're meant to come here to experience and learn in this lifetime. Good chart rectification is part science, part art, and part intuition. It's really looking at a chart and saying, oh, that makes sense. Not just one piece of evidence, but multiple, and creating a pattern where you essentially say, yes, this makes the most sense. For Aaron today, I'm going to be testing 3 different rising signs. So the first rising sign is going to be Libra, because we know he has a stellium in Libra. Second is going to be Gemini. He has a Gemini moon. Maybe that's going to be a good fit. And the last one, I'm going to keep a secret. So let's look at the first 2 because those are the ones I think are least likely. And hopefully by the time we get to the last one, you'll see why I think that one is truly undeniable. Libra rising. So what we know is he has a stellium in Libra. Libra on the ascendant means Venus is going to fall in the first house because that's where it is in his birth chart. That also means Chiron is going to fall in that house. And essentially what that's telling us is he has a core wound over being seen. And yes, that is true to a certain degree, but not as much as I personally think. This would essentially say his entire identity is around being the wounded beauty. And I just don't think that fits in terms of what he came here to do. He just seems like so much more of a deeper person than just learning that lesson. And I don't want to say just in a bad way, but like that is a very superficial lesson, and he seems comfortable with who he is on a greater scale than what he's seen as. His life path would be about healing relationship wounds, and having Venus on his ascendant would mean he is extremely attractive, which is true, but I just don't think that's all that there is to Aaron. The net worth Google story would be a prime example of Chiron on the ascendant and creating that natural wound, as well as him being a model, having a very aesthetic presence, very naturally Venusian. Look at him, Libra rising is ruled by Venus. These folks tend to be conventionally attractive, have very balanced features, and carry themselves with grace. All of that does fit, but not my favorite. Mercury would also be in the first house, and having Mercury and Libra in the first would give him diplomatic communication, thoughtful self-expression, the ability to see multiple perspectives. That fits his interview style. So far, Libra rising is looking good, but here's where it falls apart. We know he is an athlete, and problem number 1 is he has an empty 5th house. If Aaron is a Libra rising, his 5th house would be in Aquarius. This is his house of passion, self-expression, performance, entertainment. And it coming up empty just does not make sense. For a professional athlete who's competed in the slam dunk contest, it just doesn't make sense because that is a very performance-based thing. And yes, did he take it a very Aquarius place and really reinvent it? Yes. However, to me, it just does not fit. It's not as strong as you'd want for someone who really reinvented what that looks like. Problem 2, where is the team energy? With Libra rising, his 11th house of teams, community, etc. would be in Leo, and that is empty. His sun would be in the 9th house. However, he's not a foreign star. He's from here, so that creates a little bit of confusion in that aspect. His championship came through team success, and he's coined Mr. Nugget. So that being an empty house just doesn't click. An empty 11th house ruled by the sun in the 9th house just doesn't show the magnitude of why he's such a central aspect in this Denver Nuggets team. Problem 3, Saturn in the 6th. With Libra rising, Saturn, his teacher, would be in the house of day-to-day life, daily routines, health and pets, and service and duty. While Saturn in the 6th could explain his work ethic, it doesn't feel weighty enough for some of the life events that we know Aaron to have went through. The 6th house is important, but it's not usually where you find those major lessons that you need to learn. It's more about the daily grinds, health problems, and work-life balance. Problem 4 is Jupiter in the 3rd. The 3rd house naturally rules your siblings, and with Jupiter being there, it should be a protective and optimistic place for your siblings. However, unfortunately, because we have such a big loss in his life marked in his chart, that just does not make sense with what we know. Aaron's relationships with his siblings seem extremely close, and although I'm sure they were part of the lights of his life, and the relationship he has with his sister now is one of the most important relationships he has, I just don't think Jupiter shows the magnitude of what is going on in the 3rd house. So Libra rising has some beautiful fits, and Chiron and Venus being conjunct on the ascendant definitely chef's kiss, but it just does not feel big enough for me when we look at who he is. When we look at the full picture, we have an empty 5th house for an elite athlete. We have an empty 11th house for someone who we know is a central part of the Denver Nuggets. Saturn is in the 6th, which, okay, but is that really where he's getting his tough lessons? From what we know, I don't think so. And it just really doesn't capture the depth of his team and family dynamics. It just falls flat in my opinion. Libra rising is good, but just not the one. Theory 2, Gemini rising. This is where things get really interesting, and I really hate saying that, but there's no better way to say it. Part of the reason why Gemini rising would be so compelling is because it would give us a packed 5th house. If Aaron is a Gemini rising, then Libra would fall in his 5th house, which we know is a stellium. So in Libra, we would have Venus at 0 degrees, Chiron at 1 degree, Mercury at 18 degrees, and his North Node at 28 degrees. That's a stellium in the house of creative performance. This is where we could see the artist that Aaron is. This is where we see a dunk contest chart. However, 5th house is sports, creativity, entertainment, self-expression, performance. Venus in the 5th, beauty and performance, check. Chiron in the 5th, wounded performer, check. Mercury in the 5th, communicating through physical expression, check. North Node in the 5th, destiny involves creative performance. The dunk contest is 5th house energy. It's not just basketball, it's literally art. It's creative athletic expression. With this stellium, Aaron's soul path is all about creative expression. His chart ruler would be Mercury in the 5th house, which would once again tie into that creative performance. This would be his life path planet. Mercury in the 5th means his entire life is about creative expression. And although that's true because we see him do so many different things, it fits, but maybe it's just not clicking, and maybe I'm biased, but his moon in Gemini in the 1st house of identity. Moon in the 1st house of identity gives adaptable personality, which we see, emotional transparency, okay, nurturing presence, and a connection to the public, which we definitely see. Gemini moon in the 1st is the versatile person who is able to adapt to any environment that they're put into, which we could definitely see that to be true, and that fits Aaron. We would have his Mars and Pluto in Scorpio in the 6th house, and that is the house of daily work, the grinds. 6th house is your job, your grinds, your craft, your routines, also your coworkers. Having Mars and Pluto in the 6th in Scorpio is intense work ethic and transforming yourself through your day-to-day routines. And from what we know about Aaron, that is very true. He's gotten nothing but better over the last 10, 11 years he's been in the NBA. His sun would be in the 4th house. Your 4th house is your family, your roots, your home, your foundation. Sun in the 4th, people really are lit up by their family. That is what keeps them going, their life force energy, what motivates them. They are the foundation of their family unit. Aaron as the glue of his siblings, which of course I don't know their entire dynamic, but it seemed like they spent a lot of time together, and he still spends a lot of time with his sister Elise. So that makes sense. And then also him taking on his nephews, that also checks. So Gemini rising has a lot going for it, where it really makes sense, especially when we look at the family stuff and even the creative performance. But here's where stuff starts to crack. Problem number 1, the 3rd house just doesn't hit enough. With Gemini rising, the 3rd house would be ruled by Leo, which would be an empty house. And although Leo is ruled by the sun and the sun is in the 4th house, that kind of ties it all into his entire family and not specifically his siblings. So when we're looking at Drew and where we find Drew, it's kind of lackadaisy in that aspect. When Drew passed in May 2024, it seems like it definitely impacted Aaron on such a massive level and really shifted his entire identity. So we just don't see it enough there in an empty house. He took on raising his kids, he changed his jersey number, he got a tattoo over his heart, and his entire purpose essentially changed overnight. To me, that feels like a very Saturn event, especially when you consider that the 3rd house also rules short distance transportation and vehicles. So a Gemini rising Saturn would be in his 10th house, his house of career and public notoriety. So that means his Saturn lessons would be around his public reputation and in his career. And when we look at his career, we just don't see anything as extreme as in career as we do with the entire identity shift he underwent when he lost his brother. The event should match the house and not just the aftermath, so 10th just doesn't work. Looking at Saturn in the 10th, we also see him earning recognition slowly, which we could say is true. He's definitely gotten more popular over the years. However, he did experience some of that pretty early on, 2 years in, when he initially competed in the dunk contest. To me, it just really doesn't capture his life purpose. His career success came through team basketball, which would be the 11th house, and not solo ventures, which right now would be ruled by Aries. His karmic lessons seem to tie to his siblings and family when we look at his Saturn return that he is just now coming out of. Next problem, where's the championship energy? With Gemini rising, the 11th house is empty in Aries, but it is ruled by Mars in the 6th. So teams are connected to his day-to-day routines, to him working hard with having Mars in the 6th house, especially in Scorpio. But the 2023 championship, the Denver community calling him Mr. Nugget, him essentially finding his home through his team, it needs more weight than an empty 11th house has to get. Next problem, North Node in the 5th. So the issue with this is Aaron essentially swore off the dunk contest. And when we look at someone who has their North Node in the 5th house, that means they are here to perform and give creative performances. And that just doesn't sound like somebody who would swear off dunk contests and creative expression. If his soul destiny is in the 5th house, then why would he walk away from the very thing that brought him so close to that in his career? To me, it feels like the dunk contest was more of a lesson redirecting him towards what he's supposed to be learning and not necessarily the path itself. So Gemini rising is really good. The 5th house stellium explains so much in terms of adaptability, the versatility, the creative expression, all of it, even the dunk contest. It all tracks. But when I look at the totality of his life, Saturn in the 10th just doesn't make sense. We haven't seen any crazy stuff related to his career and him having to learn hard lessons around that. Having an empty 11th house also doesn't track, especially for someone who won a championship with a team and is such a notable part of that team. And lastly, his North Node suggesting an activity he entirely rejected and wants no parts of. Gemini rising is compelling, but it still doesn't fit. And then last but not least, Capricorn rising. The moment I tested Capricorn rising, everything just fell into place. Not just one thing, but everything. And that's what we're looking for. So if Aaron is a Capricorn rising, that means his chart ruler would fall in the 3rd house of siblings. Your chart ruler is the single most important planet in your entire chart. So it's extremely important. 3rd house, like I previously mentioned, is the house of siblings. It's the house of community, short trips, communication, vehicles, early education, the overall local environment. When your chart ruler, your life planet, is in the 3rd house, your entire life is about siblings, communication, and your local community. Your lessons come through these areas. Your purpose involves these themes. This isn't just background noise. This is your dharma. Now, let me tell you about what it feels like to have Saturn as your chart ruler. Saturn chart ruled people, whether you're Capricorn rising or Aquarius rising. It's constantly, why do I never feel like I'm good enough? Why do I have to work twice as hard for half the recognition? Why does everyone else get rewards so easily while I'm being tested? That's Saturn. Saturn is the task maker, the teacher, the one who says, good, but not good enough yet. You're close, keep working. You have to earn it, really earn it. When Saturn is your chart ruler, your entire destiny is set by doing the hard thing over and over and over and over again. You're being equipped for mastery, not quick success, lasting success, not flash in the past fame, but legacy. See, Saturn doesn't care about making you comfortable. Saturn cares about making you unbreakable. And the way Saturn does that is by testing you over and over until you know your worth from the inside and not from trophies. Until you can lose and still know you were excellent. Until external validation becomes nice, but never necessary. And then when you hit your Saturn return, that's when Saturn says you've done the work and here's your reward. Aaron won his championship right before his Saturn return went exact. And shortly after, Drew passed. Saturn gave him the trophy first. Then Saturn gave him the real lesson, the one about brotherhood, morality, responsibility, and purpose. If you have Saturn as your chart ruler, the constant feeling of not enough, that's just Saturn preparing you. The tests that feel unfair, that's Saturn teaching you to find worth within and never without. The slow climb while others sprint fast, that's Saturn preparing you for longevity. You're not behind and you're not failing. You are being set up for greatness, and greatness that lasts. And when you do the work, when Saturn returns, that's when everything comes into fruition and you get the reward. When we look at Aaron's life, that's what happens. Years of being tested through competition, through looking at his siblings as teachers, years of learning mastery, discipline, and humility, years of wondering, when me? And then championship. After that, Saturn return. Then true purpose through brotherhood. His life is about learning Saturn's tests are actually Saturn's gifts. And you can't just skip the test to get the gifts with Saturn. Saturn doesn't play that. You have to earn them. Now I want to talk a little bit more about his brother Drew's death, but we're going to do so carefully and with context. Drew Gordon was born July 12, 1990. He was a professional basketball player as well. He was Aaron's older brother and role model. On May 30th, 2024, he passed away in a vehicle accident in Oregon. When he passed, he was only 33. Aaron was devastated. He changed his number from 50 to 32 in his brother's honor. He became a father figure to Drew's kids. His entire sense of purpose changed. And now here's where astrology gets profound. Aaron was born September 16th, 1995. Saturn takes approximately 29 years to orbit the sun and return to its natal position. Your first Saturn return happens around 28 to 30, and it normally lasts about 2.5 years. It's the universe's way of reminding you that we have to grow up and learn the tough lessons. On May 30th, 2024, transiting Saturn was approximately at 18 to 19 degrees Pisces. Aaron's natal Saturn is at 21 degrees Pisces. He was approaching his Saturn return. And his Saturn, his chart ruler, is in the 3rd house of siblings and vehicles. Drew passed away in a vehicle accident during Aaron's Saturn return in his sibling and vehicle house. When your chart ruler experiences its return, it's back through the same house it was when you were initially born. This isn't just a life event, but this is the defining life event. The universe is saying your life path is about learning the hardest lessons through your siblings. And here's where we could get a little bit deeper. Drew Gordon's natal moon is at 15 degrees Pisces. Saturn had just crossed Drew's moon and was approaching Aaron's Saturn. The two brothers' charts were connected through Saturn and Pisces. Saturn, the teacher, the karmic planet, was teaching Aaron about morality, responsibility, and purpose in his 3rd house. I'm not saying Drew died because of astrology. Astrology doesn't cause events, but astrology does reveal patterns and meanings. This is the clearest possible confirmation of his chart ruler being Capricorn because it is such a defining moment. There's no skirting around how much this impacted him, how much this changed him, how much this really just devastated him. And when we look at Drew, we see Drew as a Cancer. Aaron is a Capricorn rising. He falls in his 7th house of other. That really was his mirror, his person, his no matter what, I know I have him and he has me. Now let's look at the rest of the chart with Capricorn rising. His 1st house, his identity, his body, his self has Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn. Uranus in the 1st is the rebel, the innovator, the person who is always ahead of their time. Neptune in the 1st is the mystic, the dreamer, the spiritual seeker, and the believer. Both being in Capricorn is grounded and practical. It's the traditional container for the eccentric soul. And when we look at his tattoos, the things he chose to adorn his body with, lots of them have spiritual connotations. Things in his own way, which is very Uranus, but through the traditional structure of Capricorn in the NBA. Capricorn risings often have strong bone structure, angular features, great teeth, great smiles, serious resting face, athletic and disciplined. They age well. They always say that they like age backwards, which comparatively when we look at him, he has only gotten more and more handsome over time. But the Neptune in the 1st adds an etheric to him, makes him extremely photogenic but mysterious. That's Aaron, with strong Capricorn features but almost otherworldly beauty. His 2nd house would be in Aquarius, but that's also going to be ruled by Saturn. So we see how he values stuff. 2nd house is self-worth, money, values, and possessions. Ruled by Saturn means unconventional relationships with money, which, yes, me too. Values freedom and uniqueness, and the self-worth that is not tied to the material things. So remember this story, the dating story about Aaron Gordon finding someone Googling his net worth? That's a 2nd house wound. Someone trying to assess his worth with his net worth. With Saturn ruling the 1st and 2nd from the 3rd house, his siblings and family teach him about true worth. We've already covered this pretty in depth, but let me give you the full picture. Saturn and Pisces in the 3rd house means karmic relationships with siblings, learning compassion through family loss, communication through quiet action rather than words. After Drew's passing, Aaron took on a father role towards Drew's sons. That's Saturn in the 3rd, accepting new responsibilities. His sister Elise was his manager when he entered the NBA and actually moved down to Orlando with him. That's the 3rd house siblings really showing up and being that teacher, that mentor. Now, Elise doesn't have a confirmed birthday, but I've seen that she's born in August, meaning she would either be a Leo or Virgo. Honestly, I get super Leo vibes from her. She just seems like such a radiant person and like a sun-ruled person, which Leo would be. Plus, Leo would make sense for her as well because Aaron's 8th house would be in Leo, and that's other people's resources, other people's monies. Her showing up in his 8th house would make lots of sense. Leos are a natural leader, so her taking Aaron under her wing and really making sure that he was good definitely makes sense. Literally managing his resources and career in the 8th house. Can't confirm, but the energy checks out. And here's something beautiful about his fellow teammate, Nikola Jokic. He is a Pisces, which means his sun falls into Aaron's third house. Jokic became his brother through basketball, not by blood, but by bonds. Aaron has traveled to Serbia, which would be a ninth house thing of foreign travel, to visit his third house brother Jokic, which third and sixth are opposites, so just that like shared energy there. Their on-court chemistry is something that goes way beyond just in terms of the communication they share. It's so ahead of its time. It literally doesn't need words. Saturn in the third says your greatest lessons and gifts come through your siblings, both through blood and bonds. Drew, Elise, and Nikola all show up here, and they're all third house teachers and companions. So his fourth house would be in Aries, ruled by Mars in the 11th house. Aren't we so happy to hear that? So fourth house, like I mentioned before, is your home, your family, your roots. Aries in the fourth house is active and energetic home life. It's also leadership with family. With it being ruled by Mars in the 11th, his team literally becomes his family, and home is his team. He found his home in the fourth house through his team, and we see that literally fans call him Mr. Nugget. Mars ruling his fourth from his 11th, his foundation, his sense of belonging, his home is built through collective success. That's why Denver feels different than Orlando, because he found his fourth house through the 11th here. His fifth house would be in Taurus. Fifth house is going to be your house of creative expression, performance, sports, entertainment, artistry. Taurus in the fifth house means he has a very steady, very grounded, very practical approach, very artistic, creates very beautiful things. Taurus ruled by Venus. He could be musically talented, which we already know, and he could even enjoy vocals. Taurus rules the throat, which therefore rules the voice. So singing, if you decided to do that, this would be supported. Taurus also rules quality in a way where they really prefer the finer things, and we see that. Fifth house of Taurus being ruled by Venus from the 10th house of career. We see creative performance is expressed through public career, not just for its own sake, and that is the key. Now Aaron's fifth house isn't empty for creative expression, and that makes lots of sense because his fifth house is very active with all the different things he does. He makes music, he's released songs, he has musical talent, he acts, he's been in movies, he models. We've already talked about that. He's a designer involved in his shoe design, I'm sure. The fifth house is what brings you joy, and with his sun being in Virgo, that makes a natural trine between his fifth house and his sun. So what really lights him up? The dunk contest is pure fifth house energy. Performance for entertainment's sake, for the art of it. But Aaron's fifth house ruler, Venus, being in the 10th, means these two things need to be connected to work well. The dunk contest felt wrong because they were inherently asking him to do things to prove that he was worthy of trophies and awards, and that they were purely for entertainment. But when he uses his fifth to build his career and legacy, that's when it flows. And we could see this. Maybe if you run it back, maybe it would work out. If Aaron had ever wanted to be a full-time creative, whether it be a musician, artist, actor, designer, this would inherently be supported because it's still Venus in the fifth expressed through the 10th house. So you have that tie back to each other. So even though there's no planets here, the fifth house isn't empty. It is meant to be tied to the professional realm and not just entertainment. The sixth house, Gemini moon, is here. Sixth house is your daily work, your pets, your routine, your service. Moon in Gemini in the sixth is emotional connection to your daily work, to your pets. You need an adaptable routine. You can't do the same things over and over and over again. You need variety in your day-to-day life. You're deeply connected to your pets. Remember when I mentioned his Rottweiler had bit him on Christmas Day? Well, we're gonna go into that a little bit more. He got 20-something stitches to his hand and to his face, I believe. And that's quite literally a sixth house event. Pets 6th house, health crisis, 6th house. Moon in the 6th would be an emotional connection to his pet, but also a emotional response, emotional crises to the event that had happened. And here's something even more interesting about this. Aaron was also in his Saturn return when this happens. His chart ruler Saturn would have been making a square to his moon in Gemini, and the thing about squares is there's tension. It's not the easiest aspect. So we got a Saturn lesson through a 6th house theme, aka his pets, that emotionally impacted him with his moon there. Plus, just think about this. Gemini literally rules your hand. So the fact that his pup also got his hands is crazy because, once again, quite literally right there in the chart. Moon in Gemini also makes a lot of sense for a basketball player because you quite literally need your hands, you need that dexterity to play basketball. I love when the astrology is like this because you're like, okay, yes, that makes sense. His 7th house would be in Cancer. 7th house is your partnerships, your one-on-one relationships, contract, marriage, and open enemies. A Cancer 7th house might mean that you seek validation and emotional security through partnership. You need nurturing in relationship. You want family-oriented partners. You can be both very protective and sensitive over these relationships. Ruled by Moon in the 6th, he needs someone who shows up for him on the day-to-day and participates in that mutual care of one another. And can we talk about the fact that there's literally like a moms who love Aaron Gordon club, grandmas who love Aaron Gordon club, because that literally checks. Cancer is a sign of moms, so the fact that like pops up and goes out for him, it is literally the most Cancer 7th house thing ever. Previously mentioned, Drew Gordon's sun is in Cancer, and with his sun falling in Aaron's 7th house, the partnership, the relationship they had was definitely a bond like no other. Drew wasn't just his sibling in the 3rd house, Drew was his other half, and that's the 7th house. When Drew died, Aaron probably lost a part of himself because so much of that 7th house is the mirror, the other, the partner. That explains even more why this loss was so profound and required such a huge identity shift for Aaron. Public reputation is defined by the wounded beauty archetype with Chiron Venus conjunction being in his 10th house. Everyone knows him as the gorgeous, gracious athlete, and we see that with Venus showing up on the MC. We know he got robbed in dunk contests, Chiron on the MC, but handled it with dignity and eventually spoke his piece, his truth, which would be Mercury on the MC. His wound became his public story. Type Aaron Gordon into Google and one of the results is definitely going to be about the dunk contest. I promise you that. That's Chiron on the midheaven. But Venus is also there. His beauty physically and also in how he plays is also on public display. He models, he has shooters, he has aesthetic play, he does creative things. Venus on the MC. And the North Node, his destiny, is also in the 10th house. His soul came here to be publicly seen, embodying grace and balance and harmony and all of those Libra things. Not about being perfect, by being graceful in imperfection, through losing beautifully, even if it's tragic. The dunk contests weren't failures. They were part of him learning his soul purpose. They were his destiny playing out. He needed to be publicly wounded so that way he could be tested on grace and what that means. That's the North Node lesson. That's his gift to the world. 11th house is ruled by Scorpio, so his 11th house is going to be his team, his community, his people. It's also going to be collective causes, hopes and dreams, social networks. So here we have it ruled by Scorpio. Scorpio is a very transformative thing, but guess what we also have here? We have both Mars and Pluto here, and as we know, he is an amazing team player. He gets powered up, he powers up his teammates. He does what needs to be done when nobody else is doing it. He is Mr. Nugget. This is where his power very much is. And his power comes through a group effort. It's not a solo thing. He is okay with being part of a team. He has intense loyalty to his teammates and his collective, his people, his fans, his friends. The 2023 NBA championship wasn't won by Aaron Gordon dropping the most amount of points. it was by him doing the hard stuff, by him showing up, by him powering his teammates through the 11th house work with defense, energy, hustle, making everyone else around him better. Not his stats, his impact. This is why he's not a solo star. And it's not because he can't be. It's because his chart says your power comes through the collective. Mars and Pluto in the 11th is you transform through teams. And that's also how you transform others. Lastly, we have his 12th house with Sagittarius and Jupiter in Sagittarius. So this is your natural undoing. It is where you are alone and isolated, but it is also hidden enemies, hidden beliefs, spirituality, the unconscious, karma, retreat. Jupiter is at home, and here Jupiter finds lots of hidden wisdom and philosophy. There's a spiritual seeking behind the scenes in which he might not know how to express that inherently, but there is a desire. Blessings come through surrender. This is the other realm when we kind of look at the zodiac wheel, and this is where there's a belief in more than the tangible of this world. This is Aaron Gordon's chart, a Capricorn rising. You can't tell me that doesn't make the most sense, especially with Saturn, his chart ruler, being in his 3rd house of siblings. Venus and Chiron on the midheaven also makes so much sense, showing the world how to be beautiful despite your wounds. Mars and Pluto in the 11th definitely shows the dichotomy of really being such a power player when it comes to teams and community. And Jupiter in the 12th really shows how something that could be so expansive could go so unseen. Everything fits, not just one thing, but everything. If there's something you don't think that fits, please let me know, because I am very curious. Also, if anyone knows his actual birth time, I would love to know if this is actually right. But just because everything fits, that's how you know you found the right rising sign. So that's how chart rectification works. That was a very long process. I am not feeling the best. I took some medicine and I'm very tired, but we made it through. I believe Aaron Gordon is a Capricorn rising, and I love that. We tested 3 rising signs. Libra, beautiful, fit for appearance, but weak on his life purpose. Gemini, great for contests, but missing depth. And Capricorn is where everything just clicks into place, in my opinion. But now let's talk about what we haven't talked about yet. Why did he get robbed in those dunk contests? That's the question everyone has, right? I mean, it's 10 years since the first one, and everyone's like, why can't y'all just run it back? Other questions we have is, why did 2016 feel so different than 2020? Why did Dwyane Wade's score hurt so much that he had to write a diss track? Part 2 is coming, and we're gonna break down house activation. We're gonna look at a little bit of synastry and see how that also plays a role. We're gonna do synastry of Zach LaVine, Derrick Jones Jr., and Dwyane Wade himself to see how they impacted Aaron's chart. Then I'm going to show you why 2020 was such a critical year, because it was essentially a attack on Aaron's entire identity. It felt like an existential crisis at the time, I'm sure. If this video helped you understand chart rectification, please let me know. If you have any questions, also let me know. I am trying to get more clear and also not so rambly. I hope it helped. But yes, this is my absolute passion. I love finding patterns. I love going deep and really trying to investigate and see what makes the most sense. I love helping understand why life is the way it is. I'm always looking for the answers to those questions. See you in part 2. Peace.